I'd like to welcome everyone to the webinar series of the Cybersecurity and Information Systems Information Analysis Center, CSIAC. Today's presentation is entitled Defense Modeling and Simulation Catalog, Art of the Possible. My name is Steve Warzala. I'm the CSIAC Outreach Manager. A few administrative notes before we begin. First, all phones have been muted except for the presenters. Questions may be asked at any time during the presentation by utilizing the chat function. And time permitting, your questions will be answered at the end of the session. The briefing slides and the webinar recording will be posted on our website within a couple of days. Finally, I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge and thank our sponsor, the Defense Technical Information Center, DTIC. The funding that DTIC provides enables CSIAC to conduct these webinars. Now I'd like to introduce our presenters for today's webinar. First, we'll hear from Rachel Orzechowski, the Director of Simventions, Inc., the M&S Management Technology Group. She currently leads the effort to develop the Enterprise Metacard Builder Resource, or EMBER, portal, and its customized versions. She also researches enhancing organizational effectiveness through the application of agile methodologies. And Tammy McClellan is the Program Director for Information Systems Technology at the University of Central Florida's School of Modeling, Simulation, and Training. She oversees the development for the Defense M&S Catalog and provides operations and applications hosting support for the various modeling simulation enterprise websites and tools. I'll now turn the presentation over to Ms. Orzechowski. Good morning, Rachel. The floor is now yours.
Good morning, Steve, and thank you for such a warm welcome. Again, on behalf of myself and my co-presenter, Tammy McClellan, we'd like to welcome you to this presentation about the Defense M&S Catalog. We hope today to show you just a little bit about what the catalog currently provides the Department of Defense community in terms of asset discovery and reuse. And then we would like to give you the art of the possible. We'd like to show you where we're looking to go in the future and get your feedback, suggestions, and comments as we go along. As part of this presentation, we'll start out at that 50,000-foot view, why the catalog was created and how it's serving the community. But we're also going to give you a little look under the hood. We're going to talk to you about the technology that's currently deployed in the catalog and how it helps provide the rich and robust search results that you're able to discover today. And then, as I mentioned, we'll look to that future. So simply said, the Defense M&S Catalog is a set of web-based tools that supports the discovery, reuse, and interoperability of modeling and simulation resources. So any of you with a background in modeling and simulation know that this community has long sought a way to formalize the development, integration, and utilization of models. But a pain point that we feel across all stages of the acquisition lifecycle is the inability to discover those assets that might already exist and reuse them if they are sufficient for our intended purposes. Because of this deficiency, OUSD R&E developed the Defense M&S capability, and it actually achieved full operational capability in 2015. So you might say, wow, Rachel, so this capability that was developed, nearly 6 years ago is supporting the digital engineering strategy? I believe that statement to be absolutely true. Digital enterprises connect people, processes, data, and capabilities. And that's what this catalog is doing. By providing enterprise discovery of models across the acquisition lifecycle and also providing points of contact for that information and allowing people to curate it, the subject matter experts. So it maintains its effectiveness and the data is up to date. Also, by allowing information to be provided by multiple organizations, we're helping to break down that stovepipe and that inability to share information across services and different academic pursuits. The catalog is comprised of two components: a discovery interface, which has been customized to support modeling and simulation that leverages the content analytics of IBM Watson. We'll get into that a little bit more when we take you under the hood. The other part of this is the contribution interface that is user-friendly, provides a mechanism to create, store, and exchange your information describing M&S resources. So I'd like to take a minute to talk about how you would actually access the M&S catalog and Ember, which is that component that's going to help your organization contribute to the Defense M&S catalog. While it only contains unclassified data, the catalog is still protected. Access is limited to those with a DoD-approved PKI certificate, meeting the assurance level of medium hardware, high assurance, or equivalent. It typically represents a DoD CAC or a PIV. Authorized users of the Defense M&S catalog include employees and contractors of the DoD and federal employees from specified agencies and associated government contractors. Everyone requesting access to the catalog is going to go through a centralized registration process. In this process, we're going to capture contact data, verify your credentials, and your account is actually approved automatically if you possess a DoD CAC or you are a government employee. You'll receive that confirmation email. You'll have access to the catalog and/or Ember depending on which tools you selected. One thing I do want to point out that as you use the catalog, all the information that's currently being ingested in this mechanism is unclassified. So the data on the metacards, or the records, as we call them, can describe classified materials or resources, but the text that describes the resource and any supporting files must be unclassified. So files can be a resource. In addition to metacards, it's important to note that at this time, actual models are not resources available within the catalog. So we are capturing information to help facilitate that discovery and reuse. So how does it all come together? Well, as I mentioned, we were looking for a single interface for multiple organizations to exchange digital artifacts in a common format. And that's what the catalog brings you. So while it may feel, because it's comfortable to see a search box and type a term, that this is just a search tool, that is not the case. The catalog is providing that single interface for published information coming from organizations, either using the Ember tool or their own repositories for multiple organizations. It's reaching out to various websites, as you see indicated at the bottom, and journals, and providing content based on web-based crawling. And it's also interfacing with external content from other repositories. As a great example, the DTIC repository. So by utilizing this custom interface that's been created, we're able to actually go out and provide a connection of data and create relationships between information and artifacts in one single location with one single login. So as we start approaching, coming down a little bit from that bird's eye view, heading to the ground so we can give you a little look under the hood of the Defense M&S Catalog technology, I'd be remiss if I didn't take the opportunity to show you what a user sees when they access the catalog. There are 3 primary tabs at the top. You see those illustrated in the screenshot on the top right. All users that have access to the catalog will have access to the Discover and the Contribution tabs. So that Discover tab is going to be your primary search interface for entering keywords or phrases, filtering your results, and even being able to discover new or changed resources over a certain specified period of time. The Contribute tab is really informational in nature, and that is for users who may have just entered into the catalog to be able to go and find the ways that they can contribute information. The third tab, the Manage tab, is available to users with elevated permissions. This tab is extremely important not only for the administrators of the catalog, but primarily for the authorized individuals from the organizations that provide information. This tab actually can provide a plethora of reports and resources about how the data they have provided has been searched, how many people have accessed that information, what is the quantity and the age of their holdings. And so the metrics that are automatically produced and the information that can be provided by the IBM Watson product on the Manage tab is extremely useful, not only for data curation, but for reporting out to various leadership organizations on the utility and the usefulness of the information within the catalog. So at this time, I'd like to turn the presentation over to my colleague, Tammy McClellan, who's going to walk you through the under the hood mechanisms of the Defense M&S Catalog.
Thank you, Rachel, for that bird's eye view of the catalog. We're now going to peel back some of those layers and take a look at the technology that's actually driving the catalog from the back end. So as Rachel has already shared with you a few moments ago, the catalog is powered by the IBM Watson product on the back end. It has a custom interface that was developed to facilitate M&S discovery and a web service architecture to provide agencies a way to curate and publish metacards. There's several product modules that make up the Watson platform, but the M&S Catalog discovery and analysis feature are currently relying on two of them: foundational components and analytical components. The foundational components module is what supports basically that enterprise search engine, the type inbox, that you're using, and it is focused on structured document processing. The analytical components module is what is looking at unstructured document processing and analysis, and we'll describe those more in depth in the slides to come. The basic mechanics of the Defense M&S Catalog is to aggregate the modeling and simulation data that is captured and received from multiple formats and sources. There is both structured and unstructured M&S data. The structured M&S data is that data that is using defined elements or fields. Examples of this are databases and XML schemas. The metacards that are published to the catalog, which also follow the M&S Community of Interest Discovery Metadata Specification, fall in this category. Unstructured M&S data is free-form text. Examples of this would be PDF files, Microsoft Office documents, and content found commonly on web pages. Another often overlooked example are large descriptive type fields or elements that are found in databases and schemas. These large text areas typically describe how a resource works, such as a simulation, what it might rely on, and they can provide great insight into other aspects that resource depends upon. Advanced indexing process tools are then used to combine the different types of data using annotation and tagging to support user queries. Some examples of indexing tools that help to do this are thesauruses, XLT customizations, and a Yuma pipeline, all of which we are going to talk about in the coming slides. Let's first talk about the discovery process. This will help us understand from a user's perspective how this works. The basic steps involve a user searching for a term. They might filter the results that come back if necessary, and then they will select an entry to view more information to determine if the entry fits their need. The assumption is that the term that is searched for is actually contained within the information used to describe the resource or entry. The reality and the challenge, however, especially with a broad community such as modeling and simulation, is that this is not often the case. Users may search for information not specifically stated in an entry, but rather something that represents the meaning of what is described. To help bridge this gap, the catalog team looked at harnessing the power of content analytics in 2019 to help reduce the time and effort to locate resources. All data, to include the metacards as well as the external content that is crawled, is routed through the content analytics engine now. That engine essentially, though, had to be trained and guided to understand the modeling and simulation community's vocabulary. This guidance is provided through how the data is indexed as well as how the data is searched. The first part entails the development of an unstructured information management architecture, also known as UMA for the acronym, and that provides the annotations for the data at the time that indexing is occurring to associate that entry with a predefined category of topics within the modeling and simulation community. This also supports the ability to use those same categories later as groups or bins or filter options that we can provide to users. This process also allows both structured data as well as the XML metacards to be combined and viewable all in a single result set. The second method involved with training Watson affects how the data is searched. And this goes about by informing the search engine of related words that someone might type into the search box so that we can dynamically expand someone's search on the fly. This two-pronged approach basically aims at providing more optimal search results and returning all pertinent and relevant entries beyond what the basic keyword search would provide. Let's talk a little bit about the search features that the catalog uses with content analytics on the back end. We just briefly discussed that we are adding new refinements, new filterable choices for users when their search results are presented. This same mechanism is what has also allowed us to commingle both structured and unstructured data. Some of the examples of the new refinements that have been added are the simulation environment field, architecture, application domain, operating environment, mission domain, process time, and entities such as common people, places, and organizations that are dynamically gleaned across the text. We've also been able to create a top features word cloud by simply processing strings of words, adjectives, adverbs that is found in the text that can be highlighted and drawn out and represented in the colorful image that you see there. We've also added about 1,300 new terms and 6,000 plus expansions to aid users in locating resources. To best understand this, you might picture someone searching, for example, all land vehicle models with a particular feature in mind, right? If the person who is submitting that entry for an M1 Abrams, however, never included the words land vehicle, then that M1 Abrams entry would not have been returned. However, by us providing a thesaurus that an M1 Abrams is also a land vehicle, Watson can dynamically extend the search to include entries with textual descriptions that meet the meaning that the user was seeking. Another feature that we have been able to take advantage of content analytics can be seen in the relationship diagram. This feature displays entries that are related to one another based on either direct relationships that users have defined or dynamic relationships that we have been able to derive. With content analytics, a custom API was developed to identify the top correlated noun sequences of an entry and then to dynamically seek those out and return other entries with the same high correlations to those terms. The diagram dynamically displays these derived linkages and shows them with a dotted line around the icon denoting the type of entry the link represents. For example, a model, a simulation, software tool, or data. Those derived links can then be turned on and off in the legend below the diagram, and we also allow for each resource link that has other associations to continue to be drilled further down by expanding that plus sign to reveal additional related entries. Let's briefly talk about the technologies that support contribution. The first method of contributing to the catalog focuses on the use of the XML schema that has been in place for the M&S community to use to support the submission of what is often referred to as metacards, which is basically XML files. A SOAP web service was developed. This web service is often referred to as the system-to-system method and is therefore basically representing that there is no human in the loop per se, aside from the fact that someone previously decided that an entry should be shared to the catalog. It represents two systems talking back and forth and sending and receiving XML information. Any organization who already has their own database, repository, or registry, or whatever they might refer to their system as, can opt to use and configure their system to send XML data directly to the catalog. This assumes the organization has a means to conform their information, of course, to the approved schema. Alternatively, for organizations who don't have their own system but would like to use a tool to track resources that they develop or use, the Enterprise Metacard Builder resource tool, referred to as EMBER, is also available. This government-owned and developed tool can serve as an organization's personal repository and is free for use by the M&S community. The EMBER tool is integrated with the catalog through the system-to-system publishing option, but it is also a separate tool and therefore provides organizations full control over which resources they publish, as well as who can read and write the entries as they're created in EMBER. The catalog also has the ability to pass queries to other systems, known as conducting a federated search, and it has the ability to crawl and index content on other websites and repositories. Rachel, would you like to add anything about EMBER?
No, I think that's actually a great overview of the contribution tool and just the power that it gives organizations who don't currently have their own repository to have a repository for their information, but then also for organizations to provide that to the enterprise. Thanks for that overview, Tammy.
Okay, thank you. So now we're going to take a look at the future and how the catalog could evolve, might evolve, to be able to support newer features going forward. To understand how the catalog could do this, we're going to get a little more in-depth under the hood and talk about some of the natural language process technologies that are available within the modules that the catalog uses of Watson. We're going to review the UMA pipeline, query expansion, query modification, and real-time natural language processing that is available through an API front end. The unstructured information management architecture, referred to as UMA, is a way of breaking down a passage of text into parts of speech, nouns, adjectives, verbs, We can also establish entity names such as places and organizations and people names and industry-specific terms. This happens on the fly as part of how that the parsing rules, if you will, have been programmed and developed. When a pipeline is configured, the index content is routed through that process to parse the text and essentially tag an entry with all its possible associations. This is the technology that we've already briefly discussed that has been allowing us to commonly bin and categorize data that comes into the catalog from multiple sources, whether it's coming from metacards or it's coming from web pages or PDF files that we have indexed. We are able to filter through that information and try to bin and tag and represent common themes across that. So one possible option with using this technology is we can add even more facets and filterable options than what the 20 that we've added so far. We're really just trying to focus on, what is it that people are interested in being able to slice and dice and hone in on something of use and need for their organization. Query expansion and modification is also another feature that we briefly discussed earlier. It is the technology that is used to automatically expand someone's search query to include other terms dynamically derived on that user's behalf. You might think of the example that we discussed for someone searching for land vehicles and how we were automatically then including the search for M1 Abrams, Stryker, or an M113. Another use of query expansion is acronyms. How many times have you entered an acronym and you don't recall the full spelling of it? That is a value that this sort of technology can provide, so that someone who enters, for example, AFSIM or OFSIM will likely expect all of those resources that have the spelled out name to be returned. And we can do that with query modification. Another area that we can further define rules and try to make things more simple, because everyone forgets between different search engines when you need to use quotes and when you don't, and using plus signs. We just want you to type in your search the way that phrase or it sounds most easy for you to describe what you're looking for, and the interface can dynamically then filter through those words and adjust when and is used or when or is used. It's very helpful for users just to keep things simple. The main reason for highlighting this particular technology is to highlight that we can add new terms and support other query expansions with the help of those contributing to the thesaurus or added entries into the M&S dictionary. An example of real-time natural language processing is the top features widget and the relationship diagram that we spoke about earlier. Other widgets that might help provide a pictographic representation of the data or highlight entries that can be done using real-time processing are always on the horizon and an option that we could explore. This is a powerful tool that can provide further assessments on the fly. The IBM Content Miner interface is a new interface, if you will, that came with the Advanced Edition product. It offers various data visualization options and features to explore the data that has been annotated by the UMA pipeline. The main tab provides a complete listing of all the documents or files that have been indexed, and the facets section allows the selection of terms from the pipeline to see the frequency and correlation between combination of terms that were chosen. This is a very sophisticated interface. It is not for the faint of heart, but it does offer some very powerful ways of looking at the combination and use of words across the spectrum of data that we have to review. The Trends tab is another powerful way to see how those results that have been entered based on someone's criteria have been increased in usage or decreased in usage, especially across some sort of time series combination. The dashboard interface allows users to create their own custom reports, and the Connections tab basically provides a web view or a tree view of how entries are correlated. Sentiment naturally is talking about whether people refer to things in a positive or a negative way across the data set that's being analyzed. There's also a variety of custom reports that are available for users to create on the fly. So this is a possibility, if you will, that could be made available to certain users. Again, as I shared, it's not for the faint of heart because you really have to be someone who's understanding the data on the back end. It's way more than a keyword or phrase type of search, but it is feasible that for those who are really trying to pull the data apart and make sense of combinations or ways that data could be reorganized together and look at the actual uses of different types of modeling and simulation resources, you can make connections that weren't otherwise available. Another option is for us to focus on the creation of a federated search web service. We briefly discussed federated searching earlier in the briefing, but that was from the perspective of the catalog, sending user queries to other sites, and then returning those results intermixed with the catalog. This isn't as powerful as indexing that site, as we're able to take advantage of the indexing power of Watson, but it is a nice feature when it's needed. This example here is focused on essentially providing a search service on demand for other sites who would like to call upon the catalog. Sort of the opposite of the catalog going out and searching, we could offer the ability for other sites to send queries to the catalog instead. This would work something like the system-to-system publishing method, but rather than sending metadata, the request would represent search criteria. As always, we still maintain the ability to continue to index other sites and repositories. This is a great example where we are able to commingle documents with rich content, whether that be papers or PowerPoint presentations that someone has developed. It offers great insight into multiple uses of a model, a simulation, even to the extent of its accreditation, as well as the standards that are deployed for use of that environment. We could also use your help in recommending new sites and repositories that the catalog can connect with. Under the contribution section of the main catalog interface, you will find various links to be able to either register as a source provider and submit URLs for site inclusion. The search score and relevancy feature that is seen when the search results are displayed to a user, we are frequently asked about. This score is based on an internal algorithm of the Watson platform and how relevant it deems the entry to be with the search criteria and filters that have been applied. The closer the score is to 0.1, the more relevant the entry is considered to be by Watson. There is also the ability to boost certain search results, and this may not be applicable at all times, but it is feasible that a dictionary of prominent keywords can be inserted to have some of those results rise to the top above other criteria. Another possibility that we could explore is the creation of a dashboard. The dashboard would offer another way of visualizing quick numbers from reports or charts to understand the types of resources that users have shared, as well as what's available. The catalog already has a plethora of existing reports, but new ones could also be added, and existing ones could be reorganized into this sort of interface for users to have access at a glance and quickly see the information. Another area that we have often heard folks ask about, and Rachel alluded to this earlier, the catalog at this time is completely unclassified information. There are different distribution statements, though, amongst unclassified information, and we've heard about the request for applying access restrictions and permissions to the data. So just as we discussed with the content miner interface, maybe not being appropriate for all users, it could be limited to those that, for example, may be more focused on the analytics side of things. We could also apply restrictions to what search results are shown to certain types of users, restricting again to only government employees when needed. And if a dashboard had been created, that is again maybe perhaps something that is best provided to direct representatives of particular organizations to view certain charts and reports about what has been submitted so that they could see return on investment, if you will. So this now summarizes and concludes our presentation, hopefully leaving plenty of time for your suggestions, questions, and general feedback. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Tammy. Thank you, Rachel. Very interesting presentation. We do have a couple of questions in the queue, and if anybody else has questions, suggestions for Tammy and Rachel, just throw them up in the chat and we'll get to them. So one question that we got was asking if the catalog supports the controlled unclassified information, CUI.
Rachel, did you want to take that for?
Sure, I can take that. So currently, we do support distribution statements, and correct me if I'm wrong, Tammy, D and E, correct? And so, you know, the whole discussion about CUI is actually a very intriguing one, because there is special markings that are required on that information. So even though something may be distributed, may have restricted distribution, it should also be marked. So I know that that's something that we're currently investigating to make sure that we're in compliance with the newest guidelines. I don't know, do you want to elaborate on that at all, Tammy?
No, I think that adequately describes. We're still in that investigatory phase.
Okay, thank you for fielding that one. So another question that we have, one of our attendees is wondering if a similar capability to the M&S Catalog exists in the classified realm, and if not, is there any plan to create a classified version?
So I can take that one as well, if you're okay with that, Tammy. Currently, there is not a classified version of the Defense M&S Catalog, although there have been several organizations that have expressed an interest in that capability. And so really the impetus, the driver for that capability will be DoD organizations partnering along with OUSD, R&E, and really making that a requirement, and then providing funding to assist with that. And I think that's where, R&E is certainly looking for partners who might be willing to join that venture with them with some defined characteristics, because as we all know, support of a classified system requires additional support above and beyond what an unclassified would. So I don't think that I think we just need to hear more of a requirement for it at that level and have the appropriate leadership come forth and be willing to help support that effort.
Okay, thank you, Rachel. So if there's a need for that type of level of classification for modeling and simulation, let's send some notes to us and we can pass that info along. We had a question that was asking if would it be possible to provide an example of a Metacard submission? The attendee assumes it's an XML data transaction from a web page.
Yes, you can visit the MSE website to actually obtain the XML schema if you want to look at the underlying elements that make that up. But it is an XML file that is transferred from an external organization and server or from Ember, as we shared, that gets passed over to the catalog. It then is, processed to pull out the various elements that are in there and then to present it, in terms of the form of what you see as a web page, but really it's a transformation of the XML data elements that comprised that file. I didn't see what the question was, so I hope I fully answered it. I was trying to go back through your chat window there.
Oh, I think that one came in from a different channel.
Okay, gotcha.
Yep. So there was a question about wondering how successful you've been in getting some of the larger M&S frameworks, AFSIM, for example, to partner and provide models and other information.
So that's a great question. And, so one of the distinctions that we'll make is that, we're not having, the catalog isn't serving as a repository for the actual frameworks and models themselves. But what it is providing is a description of those models and frameworks. And so if you were to search the catalog today, you would find an entry for AFSIM. What we found when it comes to the repositories and maintaining control of those models, that tends to be held at the DoD service level in terms of granting through those licensing processes. For instance, NGTS has a fairly complex licensing process that you have to go through. But so the catalog would be providing you those points of contact, or perhaps if you weren't as familiar with what AFSIM could do, if you were searching for a capability, you would discover that AFSIM is a framework that it's available and be given some point of contact to do that. So we've had good success with those larger frameworks and simulations having values entered into the catalog to summarize those. And really, quite frankly, it's because they're larger programs and they do have reporting requirements. And to be completely transparent, one of those challenges is some of the smaller models and simulations that are extremely valuable sometimes may not have the reporting requirements that others do. And so that's where we're really hoping to increase the content in the catalog to encompass some of those perhaps smaller projects as well, those that are in R&D right now, to help our acquisition professionals who are trying to determine where to place funding for projects.
Great, thank you, Rachel. So we have another question. Is the catalog trying to capture data, say like M1, A1 data, that it is credited by a specific organization? And then another question also similarly with scenarios that are being built?
Yes, there's actually elements as part of the schema that talk about usage. Because different organizations could use something for different purposes. And there's also information fields available for the accreditation. We don't often have as much accreditation data that has been added. It's generally more from an organizational's perspective of, their use and how it meets that need.
Okay. Thank you,
And
Tammy.
to expound upon what Tammy was just saying, that's again another great example of when you talk about frameworks and things. When you put descriptions in, the catalog and the schema do allow for descriptions of all the things that support modeling and simulation, and accredited data sets and scenarios are very important in that. The classic, and again, I think this is where we become important. And I really appreciated Fred Martin's content that the indexing of models doesn't have to be classified, even if the model itself is classified, because some of our data sets that are accredited for use or those scenarios could in fact be classified, but they could be described in an unclassified manner in the catalog, which would let users know who they needed to contact in order to gain access to those data sets. And that is the primary function of this, is to provide that connection to the people and the authoritative sources of truth.
Great, thanks, Rachel. I was going to mention Fred's comment there, so I'm glad you shared that with the audience. Do we have any other questions or comments for Tammy and Rachel while we have them on the line here? So I'll just make a brief programming note that next month, our May webinar, we're going to be featuring a presentation by the Missile Defense Agency, and they're going to be examining their approach for software assurance. And that webinar is scheduled for the 27th of May, starting at 11 a.m. So if anybody's interested in that topic, we'll hope to see you back for that next month. So Rachel, Tammy, I don't see any other questions. I want to thank you for taking the time to share this information with us. I think it's the M&S Catalog is a fabulous resource, and we're happy here at CSIAC to try to get the word out to the community, let them know it's available, and for them to take advantage of that.
Absolutely. Thank you, Steve, and to the CSIAC for the opportunity to share information about the catalog today.
Yeah, and just, if anybody has any other questions that come up later on or comments that you want to get to us later, info@csiac.org, and we can share that with Tammy and Rachel and get that info to them. So thanks everybody for joining us, and have a good day, and we'll see you in the future. Thanks. Bye-bye now.